Okay, good evening, members, and welcome to this first meeting of 2025. May I wish you all a belated Happy New Year and a warm welcome to all those present, including members of the public and the press. Before we begin, I need to go over the usual housekeeping rules. Now, there are no fire drills planned for this evening, so if the fire alarm does sound, please leave the building by the nearest exit and assemble in the Queen's Garden in front of the building. Please do not enter the building unless you are advised to do so. Please also ensure that your mobile phones have been switched off or set to silent. I will welcome those joining us in the public gallery here today and would ask that they follow any guidance and instruction given by me or by the officers present. This council meeting is being recorded. The recording will be available on the Borough Council's website. I would like to remind members that the standards of behaviour for meetings set out in the council standing orders do apply, and as usual, and we have set protocols around speaking during this meeting. No member should speak unless invited to do so by myself. If you wish to speak, please could I ask that you raise your hand high and keep it high until you have been acknowledged by the officers and by myself. Please would all members in the room use their microphones whenever they speak, as without them, anyone watching online will not be able to hear you. To use a microphone, please press the button in front and centre when invited to speak and wait a moment for the light on your microphone to come on. Please remember to turn off your microphone once we have finished. Members, in the interest of managing the meeting, please do not approach anyone seated at the top table for advice without first getting agreement from myself. Should you wish to do so, please raise your hand high. Could I also ask at the end of the meeting to make sure that you take all your belongings and litter with you? Thank you. We'll now go on to item 1, which is apologies for the meeting. Do we have any apologies for tonight? I have not been made aware of any. No? Fine. Sorry, Chancellor, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies from Councillor Lawley, Allport and Councillor Moss as well, please.
Councillor Tagg?
And Councillor Beckley-Smith.
Okay, thank you. In that case, we'll draw to item 2 on the agenda, which is declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from any members or officers in relation to any item of business contained within this agenda? No, fine, thank you. Then we shall move on to item 3, which is the minutes of the last meeting. You'll find these minutes on pages 5 to 19 of your agenda. The meeting held on the 20th of November last year. Can these minutes please be agreed? Yes, I take that as yes. Thank you very much. Item 4 is the Mayor's announcements. The one I do like to make is that arrangements are well in hand for the Mayor's charity ball on the 29th of March this year, which will be held at Keele Hall, Keele University. I would ask you all to be very generous and support 2 very worthy causes indeed. Thank you. Right. Now we come to item 5. Members, we now turn to the next item of business on this agenda, which is a devolution and local government reorganisation white paper. A copy of this report can be found on pages 21 to 37 of your agenda. Sorry. So one moment, please. We're going to have a technical issue. Oh, yeah. Okay, so if I go and then ask after there and then mention the, yeah. Councillor Simon Tagg, will you please now introduce this report?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everybody. Well, Mr. Mayor, obviously those of us who have been involved in civic life in Newcastle, whether that's long or short, who've lived all our lives in the borough or have moved to the borough and have made it their home. I think this is a dreaded moment that we're sitting here tonight to discuss this. And I think there's many late Newcastle folk who are no longer with us that will be turning in their grave at the recent developments that we've seen just before Christmas. On the 16th of December, there was an announcement of an English called an English devolution white paper, which added for the first time forced unitarisation to that devolution. And the most obvious threat, if you read the document saying that council should be around 500,000 residents strong, is that that would be a North Staffordshire authority, with the implications of Stoke merging with this borough, which would be, in my view, and I think in a lot of people's view, a takeover by the City of Stoke. And also anything other than that, like a wider Staffordshire Council, would really take away the decision-making and delivering of the services that are here in the borough to a further population further away and less of a local population. The context for this, of course, is that devolution has been on the agenda for quite a while, and I think we should separate devolution from reorganisation. The previous government was bringing forward devolution deals, bringing more power, bringing cash with that power for us to spend more locally to deliver services. And Staffordshire clubbed together with all the districts in the borough, the county, and then the city joined in as well to put in a devolution submission in September. We were going to put one into the previous government, but then this government has come in since July. The present government indicated that they wish to have submissions. At that point, there was no mention of forced unitarisation to do with this. There was mentions of mayors, and as you'll see in the attached document, the leaders gave a view on mayors, elected mayors at that time. That may change in the future, but as of September, that was the view of the leaders and chief executives that were involved in that process. And obviously, on 1.4 of our report, it points out in the bullet points there underneath the main item, what was included in our devolution deal, and that was that we would want to have delegated powers and devoluted powers in economic development, skills, education, environment, transport, housing and regeneration, and that we would want to administer those through a leaders board of leaders making the decision. I think it's key to say that this would be led by elected representatives, and that was what we put forward to the government in September. So we and many thousands of residents in our borough appreciate the history of the borough and how we've been a borough for many, many hundreds of years, and that there's meaningful local self-government that's closest to the residents it serves. It's changed over the years, as we know. Other areas have been added to it, and that has been often to protect those areas from being submerged into Stoke-on-Trent in the past. That is in the 1920s, for example, and in the 70s, and that is clearly because they felt under threat and they didn't want to be submerged into the then 6 towns. I think we've got a very proud record to deliver here at the Borough Council, as detailed in the report. Delivery of services, no debt, actually defending residents, which I think no other council, whether it's on a sub-regional basis or a county-wide basis, would have done on issues like Wally's Quarry, and all sorts of things that are detailed in the agenda, which I'm sure many members will agree with and benefit from as residents of the borough, as will our other residents. Also, we talk about unitarisation, and the government is putting this forward now, but what are the benefits of unitarisation? Where do we see those? On finances, on services? When you look around, our nearest unitarised councils are the City of Stoke, which we know are in financial trouble. We look across to Cheshire East, which is unitarised many years ago now, but we have them moving to 3 weekly bin collections. We're not going to do that in this borough. I don't think anybody's going to do that in the county. Any districts in the county are going to move forward on that. We see them at the roads in Cheshire East. I challenge anybody to say that the roads are better than in Staffordshire. Though in many cases they are worse. I was with Councillor Tagg over Christmas going over to Brereton, which is for a family meal. And the roads, as soon as you passed into Cheshire East, were atrocious. So that's an advantage of unitarisation, isn't it? Roads that are in a poor state. So there's many more examples of that. And of course, in this potential reorganisation, Cheshire East looks like it's going to be merged out of existence again to create a full Cheshire authority. So that's a real sort of kudos point for that council, that a few years later it's going to be merged out because it's not successful and can't survive on its own. So I took an item to Cabinet on January the 9th and presented the paper, which is the body of the paper that we have today, which got support that I could bring that to full council here. And I believe truly, as a resident of the borough, that we need to stand up for our residents and also for the history. of this borough, and that those proposals which were already put in by the leaders board, with agreement of all the leaders across the county, is a starting point which we should open negotiations with the government, that we should try to protect local governments here in the borough to ensure that that continues at the local level and get the benefits which we can. We know our borough has a strong sense of identity, pride and history. We must maintain this and use that as a lever with the government to try and protect what we've got here through negotiations that come forward. One of the things was that we also involve our local MPs. I think that's quite right. I've already reached out to Adam Jogi, our MP, and asked him to support a campaign to save our borough and advocate in Parliament for us the interests of our borough, and to get full backing to use his voice and our other MPs' voices in Parliament to help us to obviously change these reorganisation plans for the benefit of the borough, to allow this borough to continue as it is. And if that's working in a devolution deal on a strategic level with an elected mayor at a more strategic level, as the government seems to want, of a population of 1.5 million, why do we then need to lose our local councils under that? And I'm really pleased that Adam Jogi did mention it in Parliament since I wrote to him, and I know that Karen Bradley from Staffordshire Moorlands has also spoken Parliament against these proposals, and of course Moorlands have an issue as well with being bordered on Stoke and do not want to be submerged into that bigger council area. So I think our primary goal as elected members should be to ensure that any changes serve the best interests of our residents and preserve the unique character, autonomy and history of the borough. Now, I'm not the first leader that sat here and said this. There are many leaders of this council that have said that in the past. There's also many MPs. Paul Farrelly was a great advocate, our previous MP of this. And, and as I remember a boundary review for parliamentary boundaries, which was made out to be a boundary review on the borough. And I remember leaflets going out with Paul Farrelly's name and local candidates in elections saying Porthill-on-Trent, Bradwell-on-Trent, that at that point it was during the Conservative government that the boundary review was taking place. And that was parliamentary boundaries. So Paul was very, very keen to keep the independence of the borough, and I agree with him. And I'm sure our new MP will fight, and we should make sure that we ask him to do that. So going forward, the government has asked for, well, it's going to be setting out the full details of this by the end of January, going further than the white paper and giving more details. We await that with interest. Because there's a lot of confusion at the moment, Mr. Mayor. If anybody's been on any of the briefings or seen reports on this, you can see that the Minister himself is getting all tied up in this and getting confused about what this means. And I think the government needs to get their head right on this and listen to particularly districts and boroughs with a history like we've got and change their decision. They're hoping for a submission during March. We're not going to be in a priority phase for this. Members will have seen that some councils are cancelling the elections that were due in May, many of those county elections. Some of those were going to go forward with devolution deals of their own anyway and accepted some reorganisation within that by choice. That is their choice. We are not going to be in that phase, so we're looking to probably 2027, 2028 before there would be any significant change. But I would say the government are looking for a submission in March. So part of the recommendations is that enables me as the leader. I think I've seen already an amendment that says you should just be the chief executive. I don't think that would be allowed. We have a leaders board, and we've been working as leaders, supported by our chief executives, to get on and sort this out. And we've already done that in the devolution deal, and we must now get together and have a response to the latest change that came before Christmas and this forced unitarisation. So those recommendations are there, which I ask Council to support. And I urge all members to seek an opportunity today, which is why we put it on the agenda for this meeting, to state your views and the views of your community on this, and ask you to join our campaign to save our borough. And I think it's really important that we do that. And I will be launching a petition as well, probably tomorrow, which will be under the address of saveourborough.uk. So we'll be publicising that to gauge the spirit and the feeling of our populations on this, because I think from what I've been speaking to, what I know of the history, is that people would want to fight this. And I think we need to get the best deal for Newcastle at the end of it, but also we need to stand up for our borough. And I think that's all I want to say at the moment, Mr. Mayor. And obviously, I hope to listen to members, what they have to say today. And in that final recommendation, the idea is that I would bring something back to Council at the earliest opportunity. If we need a special meeting, we will have one. If it doesn't fit our because I want our Council to have its say on behalf of our residents on these changes that look as though they are being forced upon us by this government. It wasn't in the Labour Party's manifesto in July that they were going to do this. Devolution was talked about, but I would say again, you have to separate devolution from this that is happening now, which is forced reorganisation. And I say we stand against it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tagg. Now, an amendment to this motion has been proposed by Councillor Jones and seconded by Councillor Fox-Hewitt, and a copy has been presented this evening. However, we will now have to have a short adjournment to consider the variances of this matter. So we'll have a short adjournment, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Do I ask the Chief Executive to explain the procedure he's now going through with the monitoring officer? And also, I don't think Councillor Sweeney had an opportunity to second the recommendation.
Yes, thank you. As we've just had the amendment tabled, as the Mayor has indicated, we'll take a short adjournment in the process. Because we are now considering an amendment, we will follow the rules for an amendment. So we will come back and hear from Councillor Sweeney next. The officers just require some time to have a look and consider the amendment. I'm suggesting that we take 10 minutes, but if group leaders would like to advise if they require further time, if they can come and find me.
Could I just clarify with the Chief Executive and Legal Officer, you're saying this amendment is okay to go forward, or is that what you're going away to look at? You're already going on to the next process. Have we told whether this amendment is actually relevant? Because it has, as far as I can see, 3 parts. It's a change to the recommendation, a change to the report, and actually then moves to resolve a motion at the end as well, which I think we've got standing orders, we've got rules of debate, and I would like those to be your opinion on those, obviously, when you've had chance. This has only appeared on the desk tonight, hasn't it? So not even given before the group meetings or even the day before or the morning before. So I'd just like to hear your views on that before we then move to the next one. I'll tell you what my group's view is on our obviously being allowed to look at this in more detail.
So as the monitoring officer just indicated there, I know, Mr. Mayor, that Councillor Jones has asked to speak before we adjourn. This is for officers to take an opportunity to review the amendment. We think that'll take around 10 minutes. So as I say, I'll advise group leaders if we need a bit more time as officers, and if group leaders can advise what their position is at that time, if that's suitable. Councillor Jones, what's coming here?
Thank you. Just to stay on record that this is an amendment that's tabled from the floor. We've reserved. Turn it on. There is a light. As we move this amendment from the floor, we do reserve the right to amend the amendment should it not be deemed satisfactory by the monitoring officer under the Constitution.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. So okay, so if we can just take 10 minutes now, we'll come back and advise if officers need a bit more time, and then we'll go into the next stage of the process, as the leader and opposition leader have indicated. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about this, Councillor. It was necessary to get the appropriate advice. And from the advice that I've been given by our officers, it seems that this amendment has considerably changed from the original, and therefore it's going to be declined tonight. If you wish to bring it forward at another time, another council meeting, you're more than willing to do so, and the officers will be able to advise you accordingly. But it has to, quite honestly, amendments may, as it says in paragraph 4.19, amendments may not be moved if they will have the effect of negating the motion before the council, and this has considerably negated. It has been considerably changed, and therefore we shall carry on with the original motion. And therefore, Councillor Sweeney, would you please like to continue and second the motion?
Yeah, thank you.
We'll take a quick one, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can the monitoring officer draw our attention to which elements, in his view, have negated the motion?
Right. I think the first point to say it is an extremely long and it parts very difficult to follow motion in my respectful opinion, and I don't wish now to go through. I think we would be here a lot longer if I went through every particular nuance that is of concern, but there are a number of issues. Particularly, I'll start with the ones that were towards the end. Sorry.
I think you will find that the legal officer is trying to explain the advice that I've been given.
I was just seeking to explain in an order that might help, because I think this is, in a way, the strongest reason for it to be declined first, and it happens to come towards the end, where it says there are new paragraphs, clauses 2.16 and 2.17, and indeed 2.18, 19 and 20. Now, in particular, and these are just examples I'm giving, and I think they are sufficient in order for the mayor to reach this conclusion, which is that in 2.16, it says, whilst the council is clear it wishes the borough's proud history to be maintained in any future changes, it recognises that it offers some potential benefits, including streamlined governance, financial savings and improved service delivery. It then goes on espousing the key advantages of larger unitary councils and consolidation of responsibilities under a single authority, which is the words that are used in the opening line of paragraph 2.17. And it goes on, combining these functions into a single entity reduces duplication, simplifies processes and ensures clearer accountability. Residents would no longer need to navigate multiple layers of bureaucracy to access services, fostering a more cohesive and responsive local government. Over the page, 2.18, new 2.18. Another significant benefit of creating larger unitary councils is cost savings, and it goes on and on and on. Now, these are legitimate opinions for people to have. They are views, but they are very extremely different than the motion that's been presented to this council this evening, to the extent that I think those alone would nullify. My advice to the mayor is that they would nullify the motion that's currently before the council. There are a number of others. I mean, there's a reference there to reform of mayoralty, aldermen and burgesses. There are legalities associated with those roles. None of this has been presented to any officers before this evening. These are major proposals which are not included in the original motion. And I think that's there's other issues with it, but they're the main ones in terms of it nullifying. There's also an element within it in relation to referencing the peer review, etc., that is not directly relevant to the motion, in my respectful opinion. It also doesn't include the third bullet point regarding the petitioning of residents, which is absent. So, and also, just for good measure, it mentions that enabling the chief executive to take forward necessary discussions and actions with government and others, whereas in fact in the motion it is the leader. The leader is included there. So there's some quite wholesale changes and differences there, which in my respectful submission, and the Mayor agrees with that advice, and that's the reasons why. I'm happy to give reasons in writing in due course if you wish. Thank you.
Is that another one?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just responding under that point of order, I entirely disagree with the monitoring officer's advice. I don't see how under the Constitution this negates the motion in any way. It simply adds additional context. And I also feel that the amendments to the recommendations don't negate those recommendations. They just simply amend the wording of those recommendations. They do not remove the recommendations. They simply amend the wording. But obviously, he is the monitoring officer, and his ruling on this is what will stand. But I am very disappointed by that.
Councillor Jones, I must admit the advice was quite clear and precise, and the meaning of this amendment was quite considerably changed, and that is the reason why I have taken the advice I've been given, and we shall now proceed.
Mr. Mayor, may I just put on record, whilst we accept that this...
Please, we've had it. If you want to be here all night, we can.
I just want a quick just a right reply. Obviously, to negate is to nullify the motion. Clearly, it doesn't do that. And the point about adding paragraphs to the motion to, I beg your pardon. And
I would like you all to remember the points of order and the features of behaviour in this council. I would not like to see any unruly disputes in here. This has always been a good, well-behaved council since I've been mayor, and I hope it continues that way. If those that are disappointed wish to bring their concerns up with the relevant officers, i.e. chief executive and the legal officer, they're more than willing to do so, and I will accept their advice accordingly. But in the meantime, we shall carry on. And Councillor Sweeney, would you please like to second the original motion?
Shouted down again, yet again. Pathetic.
Oh dear.
Oh, not down, clearly.
Oh, lovely. All your speakers.
Okay, thank you. I'll start. Before I second the lead, I'd like to make a few points really. I went through various papers today looking for things, and there's a few interesting points. There's a lot of these rhetorical sort of things, but reorganisation must enhance local services and democracy. Would this? I don't know. Supported by local residents. Being merged with Stoke-on-Trent, you think that'd be supported by local residents? I personally doubt it. Have the agreement to the whole local government sector, including districts? Haven't. Unlikely to work because they would be remote with a weak link to local places. I think that's a very fair point to make. I think people from Newcastle like to be run by people from Newcastle, not from wherever it would be. How does cutting councillors increase democratic accountability? I don't know. I don't know how that works. I haven't got a clue. I'm not convinced that this will drive savings. You've got redundancy payments, you've got consultants, you've got setup costs for the new councils. When I was chairman of the Fire Authority, the Tory government decided it was a good idea for the Police and Crime Commissioner to take over the Fire Authority, scrap the Fire Authority. And I remember saying to somebody who was in charge of this sort of takeover, I says, where's all this savings you're going to make? You're going to make £2.5 million worth of savings, your consultants say. How are you going to do that? And he says, oh, it's easy. If you don't put fires out, we sack you or we make you redundant. So if you're HR, if you're comms, if you're finance, if you're legal, you're all gone. So I said to him, well, who's going to do the job? Those jobs aren't disappearing. There's work still got to be done. And he says, oh, the police will do it. So you can just bolt on all those jobs onto the police and they'll just do it, will they? Oh, yes, they've got capacity to do it. So quite a few months later, I spoke to the head father at the time. I said, how many staff have you actually lost in this cull of staff? And I said, well, we've lost the two ladies who are on the fire authority. They've gone, and the head solicitor's gone, and that was it. No one else went. This great bonfire of jobs, it's never happened. It's so much fantasy world stuff. I don't know what situations like that. It was just a few years ago. It might have changed now, but it certainly took a long time to change. There's one new authority, Unitary Authority, set up in 2023, and it's just had £80 million of exceptional financial support from government, instead of the £20 million savings it was forecast to make in 2023 when it was set up. That's the sort of thing we're getting into. I just do not understand where these savings are coming from. Services, I believe, are effectively delivered by organisations close to their communities, like Newcastle Borough Council. I live in Clayton. We all live locally. And we deliver for the people of our borough, of where we live. Reorganisation will make recruitment harder. Of course it will. Where are you going to work? You don't know. You don't know where it's going to happen, where you're going to be, where you're going to be based, what council's running us. You don't know. So who's going to come work? Mayors. I think they had two mayors in Stoke, didn't they? I don't think they went desperately well, did they? And we've got a mayor in London, haven't we, who's been knighted, I believe. Heaven only knows why, but nonetheless, he has been knighted. I don't think, mentioning mayors around here is a particularly good idea. And I don't understand the benefit of it. I do not understand it. Things like the town deals. Town deal in Newcastle. Town deal in Kidsgrove. Would Kidsgrove had a town deal with a mayor and a massive unitary authority? I mean, I don't know. I'm not psychic, but I very much doubt it. Kidsgrove Pool. It's reopened. Doing brilliantly. Fabulous facility. Whether that happened under elected mayor, I very, very much doubt it. Things like Brampton Museum, fantastic. Would that still be here? I don't know. I was at the LGA conference, and the chap called McMahon was being put forward by the Labour Party to deliver this concept, and I must admit he went down like a plate of cold sick. He had to even finally resort to, well, it's going to happen anyway. Was this sort of final passing thing. I absolutely support the leader on this. I think it's a mad idea. I generally can see no benefits from it at all, and I'm very happy to support it. Thank you.
Councillor Sweeney. Members, we will now move to the debate on this matter. Will any members wishing to speak, please raise their hands until you've been acknowledged.
Andy.
Where's the debate?
No, isn't it? No. These are speakers. Speakers. It's because everybody did that. Everyone's got a speaker. Oh, John's put his hand on the speaker to see the other one too. John moves. Yeah.
We will hear first from Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Local government reorganisation across Staffordshire is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reset the relationship between councils, the public, third and private sectors. It's an opportunity to reset council services and design better, more efficient provision for our residents and ensure that we can deliver the best value in those services. For those of you who have read through the white paper, And I really hope that councillors have had the opportunity to do that. They will see that the formation of these new unitary councils, known as strategic authorities, also come with the proposal of more devolved powers, not simply devolved to a mayor, but also devolved to these unitary authorities. So for those making the argument of the democratic deficit, I think they need to realise that these authorities are a potential gain of function, not a loss of function, and include devolved powers over transport, local infrastructure, skills, employment, housing, strategic planning, economic development, regeneration, and many others, including health, well-being, and public service reform. Much has been said about the threat to district council, but little on the opportunities. The opportunity to have a seat at the table of upper tier services, to fight for Newcastle. This is not a democratic deficit, but an opportunity for all of us to build a better local government in Newcastle. But Mr. Mayor, there's a clear reason why we need to do this. Residents in Newcastle are being failed by our county council. Driving on our roads is like taking a moon buggy for a spin. Our adult social care system struggles to meet demand, leading to bed blocking at our hospital, ever increasing wait times, and ranks of ambulances being used as temporary wards. Schools are being forced into academisation due to the woeful support they receive from the education department. Right across Newcastle, children are being let down through refusal to undertake EHCP assessments and neurodiversity testing, refusing to mediate, forcing parents to use the tribunal system to force county education to do what they should have done in the first place. I know, as a parent who's undertaken this journey recently and who has seen over 3 years of education impacted by these cost-saving and quite deplorable tactics. I'm sorry to say it, Mr. Mayor, because I know many people who work tirelessly at the County Council and fight every day to bring about better services, only to be hindered by the administration, of which Councillor Tagg is a cabinet member and holds collective responsibility. The county is failing residents in Newcastle, and it's time for change. We shouldn't fear this change. It's an opportunity to build something better for our residents. But what our residents need more than anything else is for us to embrace this change and fight for them. This is not about history. We can preserve our historic traditions through this change. This is about fighting for Newcastle residents at the negotiating table. But instead of fighting for the future of Newcastle in a bigger authority with more powers, funding, and say over our services, we have the leader doing rounds of any media outlet that will listen to him, talking down the opportunities. Mr. Mayor, we need leadership that will embrace change and fight, not howl in the wind at the injustice. I'll finish with a warning. Much is said about takeovers, be that Stoke, be that the county. My family have benefited from provision of services by both the County Council and Stoke, and I can say without any reservation that the service from Stoke City Council has been better designed, better supported, and better received. I speak as somebody who has experienced this and from my own experiences, without which I wouldn't have secured the tribunal ruling to get support for my own child. Personally, I would trade one master in Stafford for a seat at the table in North Staffordshire. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. You'll now hear from Councillor Wheeldon.
Point I'm going to make, could I just thank the monitoring officer, the chief executive, the mayor, for deciding on the procedural point, because we have on the procedure. I've lived in Stoke-on-Trent my whole life. I'm a Stokey girl. I understand Stoke. My father for many decades was chairman of the justices. My uncle was the mayor. And I had a distant relative who was also the local coroner, the third largest coronership. I know the politics of Stoke-on-Trent. I lived it. I grew up in it. Stoke-on-Trent have never had a good bank balance for the whole of its existence. With our financial and fiscal security in Newcastle under Lyme, we will be at a distance because they're a city and would obviously take precedence over a little market town, and we will be used to prop up their fiscal failings. We will be used no more than an ATM for the city. To actually join with Stoke would be an 150-year backward step. And I would ask that this never happened to this market town that I have become more proud of than ever I was as a citizen of Stoke-on-Trent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilden. We'll now hear from Councillor Stubbs, followed by Councillor Rees.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report presented by the Leader of the Council regarding the English devolution white paper and its implications for Newcastle under Lyme is comprehensive and detailing the potential threats to the borough and its historical independence. However, it is crucial to critically examine the claims made and highlight the notable absence of any discussion on the potential benefits of the proposed devolution. Historical independence. The report emphasises the borough's long history dating back to 1173, and while this historical context is significant, the report does not address how modern governance needs might differ from those of the past. The focus on historical independence may resonate emotionally, but does not necessarily provide a practical argument against reorganisation. The local government reorganisation mentioned in the report outlines the government's intention to create a new unitary authority or strategic authority, which could lead to the abolition of existing boroughs. However, it fails to consider how such reorganisation might streamline services, reduce administration costs, and improve efficiency. The potential for more cohesive and integrated service delivery is not explored either. Looking at community focus, the report highlights that the borough's council's ability to address local issues effectively, such as regeneration projects and community support, the report does not consider how a larger unitary authority might be able to bring additional resources and expertise to enhance these efforts. The possibility of broader regional planning and investment opportunities are also overlooked. Civic pride and identity. The report stresses the importance of local identity and civic pride, citing events like the 150th anniversary. However, it does not acknowledge that civic pride can be maintained and even strengthened within a larger government structure. The potential for preserving local traditions and identities through community councils or other mechanisms are also not discussed. Environmental and sustainability initiatives. The report mentions that the Council's success in reducing carbon emissions and promoting sustainability, yet it does not consider how a larger authority might have greater capacity to implement wide-reaching environmental policies and access more substantial funding for green initiatives. The potential for an enhanced regional collaboration on sustainability is ignored. The Staffordshire devolution letter. The attaching of a letter dated the 30th of September could, to the untrained eye, be considered disingenuous. Whilst I'm sure the leader attached the letter in good faith, he will of course be aware that the circumstances as to when the letter was written have changed significantly, driven by the white paper released on the 16th of December. So merely pointing to something that is not available instead of actively engaging with the process seems foolhardy. Staffordshire County Council. As other members have pointed out this evening, I feel I must highlight the failings of the current County Council and how it should not be used as an exemplar. One such example is Wally's Quarry. The leader, as the portfolio holder for environment, infrastructure and climate change at the county, will have been as frustrated as me at the county taking a back seat, allowing this authority to shoulder the financial burden when it came to fighting for the closure of Wally's Quarry. According to the county's own website, the county check for compliance with the planning permissions for grant for materials and waste developments and investigate complaints about the 250 active minerals and waste sites. I think we can all agree that no one in Newcastle believes county have completed this work satisfactorily. In conclusion, while the Leader of the Council report raises valid concerns about the potential loss of historical independence and local focus, it also fails to present a balanced view by omitting the possible benefits of the proposed devolution. A more comprehensive analysis should consider both the risks and opportunities, providing a clearer picture for informed decision-making. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stubbs. Now for Councillor Rees.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Reorganisation of local government structures in Staffordshire has the potential to deal with some of the most pressing issues for our residents. As a social worker with more than 30 years' experience, I know how broken our adult social care system is. I'm afraid that the responsibility for this sits firmly with the County Council, who hold collective responsibility for the decisions being made that have contributed to this crisis. The state of adult social care in Staffordshire has reached a crisis point, and the consequences of this failure ripple far beyond the homes of those in need. They are felt acutely within the walls of the Royal Stoke University Hospital, a vital institution now burdened by pressures it was never designed to bear. Adult social care is not merely a policy area, it's the cornerstone, the bedrock of a compassionate society. Yet in Staffordshire, the County Council has fallen short. Chronic underfunding, mismanagement and a lack of vision have created a fragmented system unable to meet the demands of our ageing population, underpinned by 14 years of a pernicious programme of Tory austerity. We see care packages delayed or denied entirely, carers overstretched and undervalued, and families left struggling to fill the void. The impact on the physical and mental health are profound, and the ripple effect touches every corner of our public services. The consequences for the Royal Stoke Hospital are stark. With insufficient social care support, hospital beds are filled by patients who are medically fit for discharge but have nowhere to go. These delays, known as bed blocking, mean that resources are diverted from emergency care and specialist treatments, pushing waiting times to unacceptable levels. Councillor Jones mentioned ambulances. I had to sit and watch with my mother, my father die while waiting for an ambulance that didn't get there for 2.5 hours. Every delayed discharge is a patient waiting longer in A&E, a surgery postponed, or a cancer diagnosis delayed. Hospital staff already grappling with the monumental challenges of a stretched NHS are left fighting fires because adult social care has not been sufficiently resourced to provide the preventative and ongoing support that keeps people out of hospital in the first place. Well, let's be clear. This is not an abstract policy debate. Reorganisation of local authorities across Staffordshire and the creation of new, larger, more geographically representative unitary councils will enable us to reset the relationships with care providers, integrated care boards and hospital trusts. A new unitary council will have then opportunity to drive forward modern, more innovative provision of adult social care across Newcastle. This can only be a positive for our residents and fix this broken system, but we can't achieve this by being ignorant to change. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rees. We'll now hear from Councillor Paul Waring.
I've got great reservations about this so-called devolution process, particularly because we've been very careful at the Borough to provide a sound financial base for the council, and as such this council benefits from significant assets and strong financial position. In my opinion, any amalgamation would be detrimental to the residents of the Borough. Furthermore, there's clear evidence that creating larger bodies actually leads to economies of scale there's no clear evidence that creating larger bodies actually leads to economies of scale that ultimately provide any financial advantage to residents. We've seen numerous cases where places such as Birmingham have got into massive financial difficulties, whereas some of the smaller authorities have managed to avoid this. That's why I'll be voting in favour of the motion. Thank you.
So Waring, now Councillor Adcock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's absolutely right that we stand up for the loyal ancient borough of Newcastle under Lyme. All of us here were very, very proud to celebrate the 850th anniversary not long ago and show the achievements and rich history of this borough. We've seen a renewal in civic pride, which makes it a real shame that we must now fight for the preservation of our historic borough. Cross-council working has many benefits, and we're proud to work with our neighbours and partners. However, A much larger unitary authority as set out in the white paper would inevitably have much less focus on Newcastle, its villages and its rural areas. Business about our town would likely be decided in Stoke-on-Trent or Stafford by councillors, very few of whom would be from wards representing our borough. Priority will inevitably go to areas of larger population, and there's a real risk that money raised by Newcastle taxpayers may be used to support projects elsewhere. By having our own council and strong voice, we're able to secure a town deal. We're already seeing the benefits of money being spent here and decisions being made here in this building. What's being pitched as a devolution of power seems to me to be actually a huge centralisation of power. It'll mean moving power and decisions further away from our residents. It would place more powers in the hands of fewer elected officials, in some cases, in the case of mayors, in the hands of one person. Wards will encompass multiple parts of our towns and villages, and places losing their individual focus and attention by councillors and by officers. If we look at the excellent work we've done on Wally's Quarry at this council, for example, would a council based further away, facing many more multiple demands on its resources, on its officers, on its councillors' time, have given this issue as much care and attention as we have here? I very much doubt it. Councillors would be representing far more residents per ward and have far more responsibilities. The increasing workload will lead to much busier schedules for these councillors, leaving less time to work on their own wards. This also means, as a side effect, younger people, people who work full-time, doctors, teachers, dentists, and so on, people who have young families will be very dissuaded in running for council. It'll impact on the diversity of councillors that we enjoy here. Councils will become less representative of their areas and their populations. It's argued that larger authorities offer money-saving benefits. However, as we've seen, unitary councils are not a magic wand to fix problems. We've seen across the country, unitary councils making significant cutbacks and raising council taxes by the maximum allowable amount. Some, such as Shropshire, are already proposing to move to 3-week bin collections. So it should not be claimed that larger unitary authorities spend money any better or wiser than district and borough councils, especially when we can be proud here that we're keeping our pledge to keep council tax rises below 2%. The unforeseen costs of reorganisation and rebranding also must be considered. Does this reorganisation really offer good value for money for our taxpayers here in Newcastle? Our borough has a very proud history. We must stand up for ourselves and make the case for all the good work we do as a borough council, the value of local representative government, and preserve our historic borough. I would just say that what is the point in trying to get elected to this council if you won't stand up for it? What's the point in trying to get elected to this council if you're happy to send our powers far away and further away from our residents? It's a question that must be asked, and I think all councillors must consider how we will preserve this borough for the future and for our residents. Thank you.
Councillor Adcock, and now for Councillor Fox-Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Clearly, I'm bitterly disappointed that the leader objected to the Labour amendments tonight designed to ensure that this council's voice is heard on local government reform. Councils have a duty to hold power to account, to ensure transparency, accountability, and that changes truly serve the public good, not the agenda of those in higher offices. To disengage is to surrender local voices to the whims of centralised decision-making. But when we talk about local decision-making and power of this council, let's recap on how that borough has been served. Councillor Tagg whipped his group to vote against a motion by the Labour group on 3-person crewing to safeguard public and firefighter safety. Members opposite went on record to say how wonderful that was and it should be rolled out across the country. Yet since, we have seen the fire service remove 3 persons on safety grounds after receiving safety complaints from the workforce. Councillor Tagg whipped his group to vote against the amendments on the Labour group's Nature Recovery Declaration amendments, aimed at rewilding and expansion of natural habitat, only to then bring those policies subsequent to the council. Councillor Tagg whipped his group to vote against a motion by the Labour group on banning fire and rehire at this council, only then to this week state that the local government white paper is the biggest fire and rehire threat he has seen. You couldn't make it up. Councillor Tagg whipped his group to vote against the amendments by the Labour group, opposing the withdrawal of the financial allocation to support legal action against Wally's Quarry. only subsequently to reinstate that funding when public anger required the council to act. The truth is, Mr. Mayor, that Councillor Tagg and members opposite have demonstrated an unwillingness to work collaboratively with anyone else for the benefit of this borough and its residents, and that's been demonstrated again tonight. Members may wish to search online now for our MP's response to Councillor Tagg's letter on local government reform, which he referenced in moving the paper. Adam Jogi says that he's committed to the politics of delivery rather than the politics of protest, following the leaders' staged protest last week. But the truth of it is, this paper is not about the borough keeping its voice and its control. It's about Councillor Tagg keeping control. And I'll finish by making all members aware of a very important meeting yesterday with those representing the council's workers, the trade unions. Councillor Tagg, Councillor Sweeney and myself met with the trade unions yesterday to listen to their views on local government reform. And they made the following statement, which is very pertinent to what we're discussing tonight. The statement is, I note that you have called a special JNCC today, 21st of January, to, in your words, seek the views and concerns of the GMB regarding possible change to local government arising from the white paper. Specifically, you have asked for the position of the GMB on such proposals. The GMB do not speak on the National Union on such policy matters. We are here to represent those who work at Newcastle Borough Council. To our knowledge, no proposals have been tabled to the council by government, but rather local councils and leaders were invited to put forward their own proposals or business case for reform. Unfortunately, but not unsurprisingly, we have had no such update or dialogue with the leader of the council. Therefore, we are not in an informed position to comment on something which has not been drafted or presented to the GMB branch. More generally, it goes without saying that the GMB would not agree to any changes that could involve compulsory job losses or a reduction in our terms and conditions. However, the GMB does recognise that local government reform done in conjunction with trade unions does have benefits in terms of economies of scale, investment from government, jobs, opportunities, accountability and freedoms. A programme of local government reorganisation for two-tier areas and for unitary councils where there is evidence of failure or where the size of the boundaries may hinder their ability to deliver will be a welcome step. But we note that both Stoke Council and Moorlands Council have better industrial relations than here at Newcastle Borough Council under this administration. This Conservative administration has, in the last few years, withdrawn and terminated trade union release agreements, unilaterally imposed a reduction in our redundancy conditions of service, reduced the council headcount through its One Council project, failed to honour collective agreements on hours, pay and annual leave, record number of staff grievances and sick leave, and every Newcastle Borough Councillor voted against a Labour motion to protect our employees from fire and rehire practices. Therefore, in closing, Mr Mayor, clearly the members' offices have a very different view to their leadership and role in this borough.
Thank you, Councillor Foxley. Before I call the next councillor, I just want to point out that it was not the leader of this council that refused this amendment. It was myself on the advice of our legal officers, and Councillor Tack has not whipped any of us, as far as I know, metaphorically or physically.
Mr Mayor, I said he objected to. I didn't say he declined it. I said he objected to the amendment.
Well, anyway, the next speaker, Councillor Skelding.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, excuse me. I don't know where to start on this, to tell you the truth. One thing I'd like to say, I'm disappointed to see this white paper used to run down the borough and the Royal Hospital. I'm proud of this borough. I really am proud. This is nothing to do with what I was going to say. Just going on a bit of a tangent here. I'm proud to be a member of this council for Newcastle Borough. I'm proud of the borough. I'm proud of the hospital that we have within this town. I myself suffered 2 heart attacks, one almost fatal, and spent 6 weeks in intensive care during COVID. I'm proud of the work that that hospital did to keep me alive on 3 occasions. So I don't know where that's all coming from. It's a shame that you're using this paper and this bill to run the people who work at that hospital down. And I think you should be ashamed of that. Yeah. Now, back to what I was originally going to say. This paper, it represents the dilution of our borough's heritage. and a lot of our individual identity. You mentioned in the amendment that was proposed earlier on, the Brampton Museum, you mentioned that as a primary cultural facility within our borough. It is. It works well. It performs outstandingly. With this bill, we'd lose that. It wouldn't exist. It'd cease to exist. Under this policy in this white paper, the Jubilee Centre, we've got funding for the Jubilee Centre going towards decarbonisation projects. Where would we get that money from? This money wouldn't be filtered into our borough. We would have no control over this. Like we've seen in the past, on a local level, in my ward of Kidsgrove and Ravenscliffe, the town deal, this was mentioned, I second the comments, I echo the comments of Councillor Sweeney and Councillor Adcott. The town deal was worth £17.6 million to Kidsgrove. We've got a pump track. We've got a pump track covered by CCTV. One, we wouldn't have the pump track. And secondly, the CCTV covering it wouldn't exist without that town deal. Upgrades to Kidsgrove Railway Station and Kidsgrove Railway Station car park, the shared services hub that's due to be developed in Kidsgrove. None of this would exist. On top of which, Kidsgrove Sports Centre, we now have that as part of a town deal. Reopening, it would never have happened. And which due to come to fruition, the Chatley Valley West project, we're looking at developing and creating a further 700 jobs for the area. With this paper going through, none of this funding, the town deal would never have happened. Now, I think it's time for us to stand up for our residents here, the residents who elected us to represent them. And I don't see any benefit in this paper, and I don't see how we can support it in any way. And I support the report that Leader Councillor Simon Tagg proposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skelding. We now have Councillor Gorton.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's just a point of clarification. Could the Chief Executive in his role please notify Council if Crewe has a town deal and is part of a unitary authority?
Councillor Jones, I will need to look into that. I don't know. I don't actually know the status of the Crewe town deal. I feel that I should, but I don't. But I'm happy to provide that clarification. Others may know.
Councillor Gorton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the start of this debate, Councillor Tagg invited all councillors to express a point of view on the white paper and on the report that's presented this evening. I'm going to speak as someone who is not standing for County Council in May. I don't think it'll come as any surprise to my Labour colleagues, Mr. Mayor, when I tell Council that I'm not a great admirer of the recent white paper. I think it adopts a very high-handed, top-down approach, and it's regrettable that ministers don't see devolution as a means of delegating some services and responsibilities from county to borough and district councils. Ministers seem to want to encourage the growth of vast super councils run by elected mayors. Some of us have reservations about that. Reading the white paper, the pledge to combine county and borough councils into a single tier of local government almost seems to be an afterthought, Mr. Mayor. There's very little in the white paper to justify that departure. I think it's reckless to push through reorganisation of local government in a single parliament, and it's very interesting to contrast the government's haste over devolution with the Cabinet's decision to defer the reform of adult social care. I wish that subject had received the same urgency. I imagine, Mr. Mayor, that if we asked Newcastle residents to outline the challenges facing our country, very few, if any, would cite the reform of English local government. But whether we like it or not, change of some sort may be coming. And I think we can respond at this early stage in two ways. We can refuse to countenance any reform and start building the barricades and protesting, or we can work with other councils across Staffordshire to establish whether it's possible to put forward a model or models for a new structure of local government. If the council refuses to engage, we run the risk of having something imposed on us. That might be the price of opting out, and I'm sure no one in this room wants that. Now, can I just, I won't refer to the amendment, Mr. Mayor, but can I refer to the paper put forward by the Labour group? And I think that that paper makes it quite clear that there are key aspects of our civic life and history, the morality, honorary aldermen and the burgesses, that must be preserved in any new structure. And for many of us, I think that is non-negotiable. One drawback, I think, of defending the existing order is that you can give the impression that the current system of two-tier local government is perfect. And in my experience, many Newcastle residents get frustrated at the split between county and borough councils and don't always understand that split. Change to the delivery of services in North Staffordshire may allow officers and councillors to improve and strengthen key services, such as adult social care. And that sort of change, I'm sure, would be welcomed. I hope that before the political leadership of the council reaches a firm conclusion on the future of local government in Newcastle, members of the full borough council get the chance to scrutinise and examine in detail the options for change. Yes, the white paper is far from perfect, but out of this flawed white paper, we may be able to put forward a scheme which conserves our civic traditions and identity and ensures that Newcastle residents have access to first-class services. And after all, their well-being must come first. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Gordon. Councillor Heaton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't hear my name then. All right. I'm probably not going to say a lot about what the rest of my colleagues have said because I do agree with it and you don't need that much reiteration. However, this council is a solvent, well-run council. It's demonstrated that it can focus and influence actions and decisions at a local level across areas that matter to residents, such as regeneration and supporting the community with the extensive ongoing issues with Wally's Quarry. This would not be a priority for a larger, more remote authority with multiple demands. I'm proud to be a resident of Newcastle. I grew up here, I went to school here, had my family here. I'm proud to be a local councillor and cabinet member in Newcastle, where we deliver quality services to our residents. This government's aim appears to me to be gerrymandering, moving boundaries to manipulate the vote. Creating large unitary councils doesn't work. Representation per councillor would halve, which would have a direct impact on residents. I can't see any benefit to Newcastle and could see Newcastle potentially merged with Stoke, a failing unitary council. I say no, 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 and I support the motion.
Councillor Heaton. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have listened to the leader of the council's comments tonight about keeping decision making within the borough local for the good of the borough. Whilst I am sympathetic to some of the points made, I want to draw his attention to the fact that the highways and transport is letting local people down. Councillor Tagg is a county councillor making decisions in Stafford now, yet the deal that residents in Audley have is not good enough. Our roads are a shambles. We're known for driving on the left-hand side of the road here in the UK, yet in Newcastle under Lyme, we're having to drive on whatever is left of the roads. This is despite, at the last election, the Conservatives promising to sort our roads out and pledged £60 million to doing so. Councillor Tagg's and Staffordshire County Council's failure to maintain the roads in Newcastle under Lyme is nothing short of a disgrace. Pothole-ridden streets and crumbling infrastructure stand as stark symbols of their neglect, leaving residents and businesses alike to suffer the consequences. Worse still, the complete absence of an integrated transport plan shows a blatant disregard for the future of sustainable travel, connectivity and economic growth in our area. It is time for real accountability and a commitment to delivering the basic standards our community deserves. Keeping decision-making local hasn't stopped bus services in Audley being cut due to no joined-up planning on local transport services across the North Staffordshire area. Keeping decision-making local hasn't stopped Councillor Tagg's plans to concrete over precious countryside in Audley by planning to install a lorry park, disregarding the public's concerns on the matter. Keeping decision-making local hasn't improved the social housing standards across my ward. Keeping decision-making local hasn't given the SEND needs to the correct provisions in schools, therefore failing the vulnerable of future generations by not providing EHCPs. Keeping decision-making local hasn't protected our churchyards or war memorials. These are now primarily maintained by volunteers. So in summary, whilst I want to carefully consider any planned reform of local government, I certainly don't subscribe to the idea that Councillor Tagg's leadership has delivered for Newcastle and Lyme, nor his plan to disengage with those proposals for change to local government. Burying our heads in the sand, pretending it won't happen, isn't proactive, it isn't even reactive, and doesn't do justice for the people that we represent. Thank you.
Councillor Lewis. Councillor Holland.
Good Lord, Mr. Mayor. Can I start by placing on record my sympathies to Councillor Rees for the incident that he described, which affected his family. I think delayed discharge into social care is an incredibly difficult thing, and I believe it is for the government to lead on a solution to that. And I am not entirely certain that moving local authority boundaries will result in the change that his family would have benefited from, and so many others. I have to say I'm very, very disappointed. I mean, it won't surprise you that I'm very disappointed at what we've heard from the Labour Party in this room tonight. It's very difficult, given the emotions that run high in a debate like this, to properly express those. But the Labour Party have done us a favour in bringing a document to us today, because it's clear both in the document and in their speeches that they have come to kill the borough. They have written a suicide note for our borough. They have come here tonight to say to us, this is going to happen to you anyway, let's make the best of it. They've come to invite us to celebrate the supposed benefits of larger unitary authorities. And in the last page of their document, in the suggested resolutions that we won't be voting on because they are out of order, they exhort us to beg for the government's permission to retain those things, the morality, our aldermen, our burgesses, which belong to us by ancient right. They are ours, and you want us to kneel before the government and to beg for permission to keep our history and our heritage. And I would like to beg councillors on the Labour benches tonight, anyone who's not yet spoken, I would beg for any of them to stand up for our borough and not to capitulate in this shameful and craven way to a government that wishes to do us harm in the same way that it wishes to do pensioners harm, in the same way that it is harming the life chances of so many in our country. What I would like to say in respect of the report that we're actually debating is that there are three examples I can think of that are specific to us as a borough. I mean, we could consider more widely whether unitarisation is a good thing. We could consider what the optimum size for a unitary authority might be. But here are the three that I came up with as I was sitting listening to other contributions. I thought Councillor Adcock hit the nail on the head when he mentioned Wally's Quarry. Can you imagine a larger authority? I know we've had discussions about the distinction between district and county, but we are the Environmental Health Authority. A unitary council in our place would also be the Environmental Health Authority. Can you imagine that the response of a larger council area would have been anywhere near as good, with full council speaking with one voice on that issue, with money set aside out of the whole pot for legal action, with an item on the agenda at every meeting of that council's executive during the worst periods and the worst phases of that fight? I do not believe it would happen. The second example would be local planning. We know, we're not guessing here, it's not a hypothetical situation. We know what happened when a joint local plan was prepared, including the City of Stoke-on-Trent and ourselves. It meant more housing for us. It meant our green spaces being used to suit the city's housing needs. The numbers were in the proposed documents. I am glad we voted to stop it, but can you imagine a North Staffordshire or a Staffordshire or an even larger area unitary authority not placing the needs of the large city at its centre over the needs of our borough. And the third example that I thought of was town deals and regeneration money. We got 2 town deals. We got 2 towns in our borough, and we were successful in getting town deals for both of them. In a sense, I come here tonight to praise Stoke-on-Trent, not to bury it, because my recollection of the town deal funding that was announced was that none of the 6 towns were eligible because of the city's federation. But again, let us imagine a wider area, an 11-town borough or a 22-town unitary authority. Can you imagine a situation in which we would secure the large regeneration cash that we got out of the previous Conservative government? I myself cannot. In terms of regeneration funding, even the Future High Streets Fund, and this is very, very niche, but the Future High Streets Fund was limited. Local authorities were told you can only bid for this for certain areas, and poor Stoke-on-Trent next door to us had to pick the bits, the towns that they wanted to prioritise with that money. But we in this borough secured phenomenal deals. We got really, really good investment out of the previous government, and that's partly due to our closeness to our communities and the tightness of our focus. Those were the 3 things that I wanted to mention, Mr. Mayor, that I think are most germane, but there are lots of other examples. We really, really, really need to support the leader on this. We need to stand up. We need to wake up. And we heard briefly, I think it would have been one of the councillor for Audley who mentioned burying heads in the sand, and another councillor earlier spoke about how we need to work with government. We don't need to shirk from our responsibilities. Well, actually, we are working with government. And we're doing so on our own terms. We do it through the Staffordshire Leaders Boards. That is our attitude to regeneration. It has been long-standing, that arrangement. The City of Stoke-on-Trent have just come on board with that. And what better example for us to give than to say that we endorse the way that we're doing things. It's bottom-up, it's not top-down. That is the sort of settlement that we need to see. But the first thing we need to do, Mr. Mayor, and the first thing that, again, I really, really encourage members to support us on this side of the chamber. Labour members need to wake up. We need to save our borough. We do not want to capitulate to the government. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Holland. Councillor Brown.
Well, in answer to Councillor Holland, I am sticking up for the borough. Every time I go and deal with a no-fault eviction on Parkside or deal with a flood on the mineral line, or any time that I sit on a 3-day inquiry on the quarry, I am showing my commitment and sticking up for this borough. That doesn't mean that I would not look at ways of improving and enhancing the services we provide. So starting from our residents, we haven't fully consulted with them yet, so we can't speak for them yet and say that they would be opposed unilaterally to any reorganisation. Many people aren't as interested in local government as we in this chamber are. In fact, many people would say as long as they can access services and they pay reasonable council tax, then they don't care how it's organised. In fact, what I would say is, if we were designing a system now, would we redesign it the way it is? Because would we use this current system? That is a tiered system which varies greatly from place to place: unitary, county, borough, district, town and parish. And residents may actually consider this a patchwork system which causes confusion in terms of who does what and can delay their access to services. For instance, in the recent cold snap, residents contacted me about grit bins, and I had to advise them that depending on the colour of the bins, these were the responsibility of the county or parish council and not the borough council. Similarly, if a bus stop is vandalised, the shelter may be replaced by the parish council. If it needs moving or relocating, that is county council. And if the pavement around it needs resurfacing, that's a borough council issue. I still get confused after nearly 3 years. So how do residents get to know? A unitary authority performs all of these functions. A unitary authority could involve simplifying the way the council works, promotes greater efficiency and drive down costs. and the government estimates the public purse could be better off by £2 billion. Now, having worked in the public sector for most of my career, I know only too well that the principle of economy of scale will be used when times are hard. Many inquiries into failures of public service mention lack of joined-up multi-agency working, and this is ever likely when housing is separated from children's services and from health. Residents need an integrated approach. Also, larger scale projects, economic development, skills, energy and environment, transport, housing and regeneration are much more meaningfully organised over larger strategic areas. Finally, I would say that we should not take an all or nothing position on this. Firstly, as the risk assessment on page 5.1 states, there is a lack of a definite model on the table, and Councillor Tagg has said himself that we won't clearly know the options for some time. Secondly, as elected members, we need to adhere to the Nolan principles of public life, and these include selflessness. And too much of the rhetoric we are hearing could be perceived as members looking after their own interests in terms of their roles and their positions on the existing council. It is likely that it's going to happen. So we need to be positively at the table, arguing for the best options. My residents would want anything that could simplify services and save taxpayers' money to be very carefully considered, and that is my position.
Councillor Simon Tagg. Oh, well, there is one more speaker. I thought you wanted to speak. It's Councillor Fear.
I'm not sure whether I'm now Mr. Mayor, Councillor Tagg or myself, but I'd like to be myself, if that's all right. It's been a sobering evening, Mr. Mayor, it has to be said. It doesn't seem very long ago since we were here celebrating 850 years of our borough. Now we seem to have, and at that time I seem to remember, pretty much everyone in this chamber rather liked this borough. Now we seem to have a substantial minority who are talking the borough down at every possible opportunity. The English devolution white paper, grotesque intellectual dishonesty by the Labour Party. Well, that shouldn't surprise us, of course. Intellectual dishonesty goes hand in hand with socialism. But this isn't about devolution. This is about centralisation. It's about sucking power away from local groups to bigger and bigger groups with fewer and fewer elected members per head of population. It's about a growth of central bureaucratic power. And I'm amazed, frankly, at the worship of big is beautiful on the other side of this chamber, as if somehow if you make a big thing and you have a bunch of local government officers who don't have very much accountability in any particular region, it'll all be so much better. I've been on this council quite a bit. Every power I've seen sucked away from the borough upwards has got worse. I see absolutely no reason that my empirical experience of what happens when you centralise will change from this thing. This is about, as one of the councillors, Councillor Whelan, I think, said on this side, it's about creating an attempt to create Labour fiefdoms. What we'll have is not even a merger with Stoke-on-Trent. Stoke celebrates 100 years this year. I wish Stoke-on-Trent well. I wish it another 100 years. What we will have is a larger amorphous blob, a blob devoid of history, devoid of heritage, devoid of civic pride. But that, Mr. Mayor, I would suggest to you, is one of the reasons why we want to do that. Because people placed in such situations lose heart. They're easy to push around. And let's be honest, the Labour Party hates the history and tradition of this country. So breaking it up, smashing up that history into non-historical, ahistorical blobs is absolutely meat and drink to what they're doing. We would be in a permanent minority. Let's not forget that, a permanent minority. Councillor Fox-Hewitt rehearsed the gripes of a minor pressure group in this borough. Well, if people don't like the council here, we can be voted out by local people on local issues. Actually, Labour Party have not done very well at that. Perhaps that's why they're not interested in such a thing. Who knows? But in a large blob, we will be in that permanent minority. Councillor Jones talks about being at the table. Indeed, we would. We'd be under the table looking for the crumbs of our masters. What we have here is the modern day Esau, except it's worse than Esau because they're not going to sell their birthright for a mess of pottage. They're going to sell the borough's birthright for a mess of pottage. And brutally put, Mr. Mayor, they won't even get the pottage at the end of it anyway. There is no reason why we should not stand up here. People say, oh, it's going to happen, so we've got to make the best of it. Was that the attitude of the Solidarity trade union in Poland? Oh, we've got a communist tyranny. Oh, we better make the best of it. No, it was to resist. And they won. And there's a heartening thought, perhaps, on this day of all days. Today is the anniversary, some people may know, of Rorke's Drift. Small group of British soldiers fought against what seemed like overwhelming odds, and they won. I hope this borough will run through too, and I certainly am going to back this motion.
You, Councillor Fear. Before we go any further, I'd just like to point out that the Chief Executive can clarify that Crewe was one of the 101 towns in the Towns Fund, and that Newcastle and Kidsgrove were 2 of the 15 towns in our region to be part of that fund. Now, if there's no other speakers on this motion, I would ask Councillor Tack to sum up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think right at the beginning of this, I said when I introduced, it seems a long time ago now, looking for people to express their views, and I think we've had that tonight, really. And I think I thank all members for their views from across the board. I think it's really important we take those on board. But I'll address some of them, the views that have been put forward by members, particularly from the Labour side, because they need to be corrected. I think a number of members, including the leader of the Labour group, have said that I am not going to be engaging in this. I think if you'd listened to my earlier speech when I introduced this item, clearly we are going to be engaging with this right from, and have been since this announcement in December, when it was sprung upon local government, this reorganisation part of the devolution. And we have been key members of putting together the bid that went in for devolution in September, which the government never actually responded to. Staffordshire, Stoke-on-Trent, Newcastle Borough is still waiting for a response from the government of our Devo deal, which submission that we put in, which would have brought powers and funding back to this area to spend, in conjunction with our colleagues. Instead of having a mayor, instead of having reorganisation, we'd use the existing boundaries of local government, and we could have delivered, and we could still deliver. That should be the starting point in our negotiations with the government, and something I will take forward into the Leaders Board when it next meets. I think that's really key. I think on the issue of Councillor Stubbs, you can see there's a county council election coming up. Thankfully, we do have a county council election. They've been cancelled in a lot of the country. Is that attacks on the county council, particularly over Wally's Quarry, I think are bad form, because Staffordshire County Council, through its health and public health function, have been heavily involved in our response to this and continue to be so, and have funded health surveys and other sorts of things to gauge the impact on local people, which has been really key on informing UKHSA and our strategic group, because people are claiming, this should be treated as a major emergency. Well, it has been treated as a major emergency by the councils within Staffordshire through our civil contingencies unit since 2021, and the county council have played their part within that, and have also played their part through their planning function when necessary to back up the Borough Council and the Environment Agency. We can discuss Wally's a bit later when it's on the leader's statement, but it's just wrong when you say that, Councillor Stubbs. I think that's just early electioneering on that. Well, we come on then to electioneering, and I'm going to have to rewatch Councillor Fox Hewitt's submission just to see, and so I could then put all right the inaccuracies within that. But I'll just pick out a couple. And I think one was the meetings with the unions, which I called. He read out the submission from one of the representatives from the unions, and it starts by saying, I note that you've called this meeting because you want to hear our concerns and views. And then in the next paragraph, it says, unfortunately, and very surprisingly, we haven't had any update and dialogue. This was sprung on us before Christmas. Straight after New Year, I asked the unions whether they'd like to come in for a meeting, a special meeting of our joint, which we've carried throughout our administration, which is a lot less different. There's a lot different from when Labour ran the council up to 2017, when for 2.5 years they never met with unions, when this councillor was in such a state. I'm speaking now, and I'll have my say. I'd interrupt you, councillor. This is bullying from you, and you better be careful because complaints will come in if they haven't already. So I think that is wrong, and I think the real story is that we're trying to engage and hear the views of the unions, and we're going to carry on doing that throughout this process. I think the other thing was, just going back to Wally's Quarry, Councillor Fox claimed that we were sort of voting against something and then nicking their ideas and bringing it forward. On Wally's Quarry, they wanted to bring forward 2 judicial reviews that would not have changed anything. They would have spent all of the money we have for our fighting fund for Wally's Quarry. My input, this group voted for taking our abatement notice forward, which is the powers that we have locally to hold the operator to account. And thankfully, we've done that. And thankfully, now we can use that information that we have got from that abatement notice process and the legal action we've started to take to back up the EA in their rejection of this appeal by the operator, so we can close this site, get it capped off and restore it, and finally end the issues of stop the stink and stop the stink. So on that one, I just want to, on that, I think one of the most positive comments was from Councillor Gorton. I think it was a deep and meaningful comment. Thank you for that. And I think I would say, again, this has been sprung upon, not just us, but local government, by a government that didn't put it in their manifesto, that asked for bids in September for devolution without mentioning this. And then the minister pops up in December and does this. But I would also say that this minister doesn't seem to know his own policy. In the last 24 hours, he's had to put out a correction where he actually stated and was misstated or misquoted, but it's in Parliament. You could go back and look at it, I think, on video, saying that local government reorganisation wasn't a prerequisite for the for devolution. That has been quickly changed. So I don't think he actually knows exactly what he's doing, actually, and he needs to get up to speed on this. And I will be writing to him to tell him about Newcastle's concerns about reorganisation and that we can have a Devo deal without that, and we should be pressing forward on that. So thank you, Councillor Gorton, for that. I think also, obviously, the letter delivered to our MP Adam Jogi had immediate effect. He did the next day or 2 days later mention reorganisation in Parliament. So thank him for that. I thank him for his response tonight. If you take out the London theatrics and all of that out of it, or North London theatrics out of it, I think I can work with him, I hope, to put forward a case, accepting the history of the borough, accepting all we've talked about here about local services are best, and also point out some of the deficiencies of unitarisation in bigger councils. It's there to be put forward, and we will do that. But I will say, if the government want to force this forward and they decide to do so, we will work with our partners to make whatever solution is imposed on us happen. But we're not there yet. There's a long way to go, and I think we should be fighting this. That's why I've taken this position. I thought I was going to come here tonight and get some stick, obviously, but I didn't think I was going to get the stick for standing up for our borough from a Labour group whose councillors in the past have campaigned tooth and nail at election time against such things. And we've got leaflet proof from the years past from somebody who mentioned Alison Gardner, I think, earlier. We've got a leaflet from when she stood in Westbury Park where she was coming out against a merger with Stoke. So I just don't know where this has come from. It's directed at me, as it usually is. But all I'm doing, I think, if I go out there, and I have done in the by-election that's taking place tomorrow, and ask people, they do not want to be merged because they see that as a takeover by Stoke with all of its problems. It doesn't need that neither. The city does not need 8 years of reorganisation. It doesn't need that. It needs to sort out its problems. And we expect Labour to attack the county council. Of course they do. But I will just say, a few years ago, Labour members were putting forward the idea that we should have a Newcastle unitary. So that's, that was... so that was they could put that forward tonight, isn't it? That could be an idea, isn't it, to take forward? So let's see where that would take us. But what we've seen here is almost, as Councillor Holland, I think, said, is almost a surrender. And Councillor Fear has said a surrender, which is so surprising given the history of the Labour Party in Newcastle. So I'm really disappointed at that. So moving to the recommendations which were before us, I think in the amendment that came forward, which was not allowed by yourself, Mr. Mayor, in consultation with the officers, it made some at the end a motion about protecting mayoralty, aldermen and burgesses. If you look at recommendation 2 here, pledge to stand up for the historic independence of our borough. That's your mayors, that's your burgesses, that is your aldermen, that is the whole part and parcel, caboose and whatever you want of it, of our independence. And we will stand up for that as we go forward on this. We were petitioning the borough, so perhaps then we'll start to find out. We will put that petition out there and see, how many people sign it and get a chance to sign it as well. And I would urge all members to do that, to see what we get a view back from the people of Newcastle as we move through this area. And we'll also be discussing this with the government and the ministers and writing to them about this. And also we'll expect our MPs hopefully to help us. And we've got more than one MP, haven't we? So we do have 3 MPs in this borough that represent the borough. Hopefully they can help us to get a sense and naturally support Karen Bradley in Staffordshire Moorlands, who fears the same things that we fear in the borough from her district as well. And then lastly, enabling myself. It can only be myself that negotiates at the leaders board. That's the constitution. Chief executives can't sit around with leaders and make decisions. It has to be the leaders. And I'll of course be taking the very valued advice of our excellent new chief executive and any other officers that need to give me that advice. And I will report back next to the next suitable full council. If that needs to be a special meeting, we will have that, because I think it was Councillor Gorton or somebody else that said, it should come back to this council to make a decision. We've got more of the facts, but what we've heard so far is just not acceptable. And the weight has been sprung upon all local government by a government that didn't go out to the people in July. And in Newcastle, for example, if they'd gone out and said, this is where we're heading, there may have been a different result in May, July in the election, perhaps. And there's been a lot of those things which this government has now brought forward, which weren't in their manifesto, and we see it on a daily basis. This is the one which is going to affect us locally more than anything. And I think we should make our case, fight where necessary, see where that gets us. And then if this is enforced upon us, we would have to make it work to get the best deal for the people of Newcastle. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Tagg. The recommendations have now been moved and seconded. So we'll now move to the vote on this matter. All those in favour, please raise your hands in the appropriate manner.
Name vote, please, Mr. Mayor.
That's all right with you, Councillor Jones?
It doesn't have to be. 12 people are standing up.
Well, if he wants to get 16 or 12 or however many it is to stand up, then it's not down to me.
Okay. Is everyone? I've got one. It's fine. Yes. I just noticed Councillor Fox Hewitt's left the chamber, but is that? Are you happy to continue without him being present? No, just.
Thank you. I would prefer to wait for him to
I'm just trying to be fair to all parties, because he's just left.
I prefer to wait until he returns.
Well, I'm not going to wait forever. I'm just saying, if someone wants to go and get him, then. Yeah. Okay, I think we'll start. I think.
Mr. Mayor, given that although this is traditionally done alphabetically, it won't materially affect anything, could I suggest that we call Councillor Fox Hewitt last? And
yes, I agree.
Marching on, we can get on with the procedure and then not exclude Councillor Fox Hewitt.
I wasn't seeking to confuse matters, councillors. Apologies. I'm just trying to be fair to everyone.
He's coming back anyway.
To be part of the vote.
Is he coming back?
We'll carry on, and we'll deal with him last. That's fine. Okay. Councillor Adcock.
Or
Councillor Barker, Lillian Barker. Councillor Beeston. Councillor Beresford. Councillor Jacqueline Brown.
Councillor Amy Bryan.
For.
Councillor Jill Burnett Faulkner. Councillor Nicholas Crisp. Councillor Sylvia Diamond.
Against.
Councillor Joel Edgington Plunkett.
Against.
Councillor Andy Fear.
For.
Councillor Fox Hewitt in your seat. Councillor Fox Hewitt. Against, thank you. Councillor Richard Gorton. Councillor David Grocott. Councillor Jill Heeson. Councillor Holland.
For.
Councillor Hutchinson.
For.
Councillor Johnson. Councillor Jones.
Against.
Sorry, I should have said Councillor Dave Jones. I apologise. Councillor Simon Jones. Simon Jones? That's on my list, but I don't know why it's on my list.
Here.
Okay, we'll move on. Councillor Rebecca Lewis. Thank you. Councillor Paul Northcott.
For.
Councillor Barry Panter.
For.
Councillor Andrew Parker.
For, Mr. Howard.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Rees. Councillor Richards. Councillor Skelding.
For.
Councillor Stubbs. Councillor Sweeney.
For.
Councillor John Tagg. Councillor Simon Tagg. Councillor Jill Waring. Councillor Paul Waring. Councillor Joan Wheeldon. Sorry.
My forever unwhipped vote for.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jill Whitmore.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Wilkes.
For.
Councillor John Williams. Sorry, apologies. Councillor Jill Williams. My eyes have escaped me. It's getting after 9 o'clock now. Councillor John Williams.
Again.
Councillor Ruth Wright. Thank you. So, should bear with me a second. Okay, well, the motion is carried. The numbers I have is in favour 25 and against 13. But
If there are no abstentions, then,
no abstentions, sorry. No
then
abstentions.
the matter is dealt with. We now move on to item 6 on the agenda. Members, this item is a statement of the Leader of the Council. A copy of this can be found on pages 39 to 42 of your agenda pack. I'm going to ask Councillor Simon Tagg if he would like to introduce his statement. I will then invite members to put questions to the Leader or relevant portfolio holder, or take each paragraph of the statement in turn and will invite up to 3 questions at a time before I ask the Leader to respond. If I could remind members, this is not a debate. Once the Leader has responded, there is no right for members to reply. Councillor Tagg, would you like to introduce your statement?
Yes, I would do. And I think, over the time I've been leader and leaders before of this council have had leader statements. And this outlines the work that we do as a district council, borough council for our residents. And, you can see the breadth of services we provide and the influence which we have locally, which should be protected. And so I'd move the statement for comment and any questions, obviously. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Members, we note that in paragraph 1, Cabinet met on the 3rd of December 2024 and the 9th of January this year. Do members have any comments or questions or any items from the aforementioned Cabinet meetings that are not covered in the Leader's statement? Paragraph 2 then is about Wally's Quarry odour issue. Do members have any comments or questions on paragraph 2? Councillor Adcock and Councillor Dave Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The situation for those living around Wally's Quarry over these last few months has been a nightmare. The relief and joy that the closure notice brought has now given way to increasing anxiety and dismay over the deteriorating environmental situation. The toxic odours are dominating people's daily lives once again and invading their homes. It's become a regular occurrence and a source of stress and worry for many. National news outlets have been reporting extensively on the worsening situation over the last few weeks. We were shocked and appalled to see the figures last week showing over 3,000 complaints in a week and the worst set of odour figures for the MMF that I can ever recall. We fully back the Environment Agency in prosecuting its closure notice, and it's right this council has applied to become a principal partner, given our extensive role in monitoring the site, in gathering data and supporting residents throughout. What really needs to happen now is the Secretary of State needs to urgently fast-track this appeal hearing. Every week this goes on without a proper resolution, residents are suffering. We also need the Minister to come and see for himself what my residents have to suffer with on a daily basis. Our MP needs to be lobbying for this every day. The issue has not been won. There is much work left to do. Wally's Quarry referring to the ongoing capping as temporary shows the attitude of the operator towards the directives being given to them by the EA currently. In my own opinion, the EA also needs to consider declaring an environmental emergency at the site, given the sharp increase in pollution we are seeing right now, despite no new waste entering the site since November. I look forward to hearing more news on the appeal process as soon as we have it, because the residents I represent live in a very real state of health danger, anxiety, and fear for their future. I thank all those who have already submitted evidence for the appeal, and I wish all those involved in fighting our case the best of luck. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary question?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Dave Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to echo Councillor Adcock's comments about the odour. It's been a horrific couple of weeks as one of the collection of councillors alongside Councillor Wheeldon as well and Councillor Fear who live in very close proximity to this site. And I work at the building of business that is closest to this site and have to deal with this odour daily and have done for many years. And to work on the appeal, submitted a very robust appeal, both on behalf of myself as a ward councillor for Keele, but also on behalf of the Labour group. And I hope that that will be useful in ensuring that we prevent the operator from being successful in their appeal. Which is why I was incredibly disappointed, and I hope the leader would agree with me, that recent comments on Wally's Quarry in election literature from the Conservative Party candidate in the Town Ward by-election are factually inaccurate and damaging to the good cross-party working that have enabled this council to take meaningful action against the operator and Environment Agency. I quote the following line: "They, meaning Labour, only seem to mention it at election time." I will remind the leader that it was Labour councillors who called the emergency meeting in 2021 that led to the establishment of the working group, which paved the way for council to act through the abatement process. That once again, it was Labour councillors that called a special meeting of council just over a year ago that established the committee of inquiry that heard the devastating stories of the impact of the odour on residents. Though he...
Jones, are you going to ask a question or make a statement?
I'm making a comment and forming part of a question, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay. Though he will remember that at a special meeting of council, the Conservative group amended a Labour motion watering down commitment to legal proceedings that may have led to earlier closure and a public inquiry. I therefore hope that the leader can agree with me that these comments are factually inaccurate and harm the long-standing agreement that Wally's Quarry remains an issue that unites us in seeking a resolution rather than being a political divider, and will condemn Mr. Lancaster's comments publicly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Simon Tagg. Oh, is there another speaker, Councillor Wheeldon? You wish to speak?
Just the comment. I support everything that Councillor Adcock has said. It is dreadful from Wally's Quarry. One of the things that concerns me, and I don't know the answer to this, But I'd like to know what monitoring is taking place as far as the EA and the closure of Wally's Quarry and the capping is. Are they making reports? Are they allowing Wally's Quarry to do it for themselves? Are they having any report feedback from the Wally's Quarry management to the EA, which could then go to the leader of the council and then be downflowed to us? I don't know who's watching what is supposed to be happening, and I think it would be beneficial to know that.
So, Will, do you have a supplementary question? Thank you. Tag, would you like to?
Okay, those three questions. Thank you. I think positive from all three speakers actually about we need to get this resolved, and the suffering that is going on has been amplified since Christmas and New Year. We've all smelt it. We've all smelt it again this evening as we've come to this meeting or been in this building. I think the word cross-party approach to this has been tested, and I've actually mentioned it in at least 2 meetings here when I've leaned across to Councillor Jones and said, oh, is this really cross-party working? When we had, a number of residents coming in and being, in my view, orchestrated into, and we had people coming behind here and almost, sort of verbally abusing myself. We had others doing that from the public gallery as well. Clearly, again, talk about complaints coming in. I think complaints went in against certain councillors about that. So I think, that's really pushed it. And I think the first, you mentioned, Councillor Jones, the first meeting, that was a jointly called special council meeting back in, I think it was 2021, wasn't it? So let's get that right. And I think in elections, leaflets are put out and they make the case for the electorate to vote for them. And I think sometimes people take it a bit thin-skinned. There's some of the stuff that's said on leaflets about me in the past and in my work in Maybank or when it was in Westlands, and actually it brought me more votes in the end when Labour Party put leaflets out in those wards. So let's get it into proportion. But I think you're quite right, Councillor Wheeldon, and I know that our Chief Executive who sits on the SCG, which is that officer group incident group on this for this awful incident we've got in Newcastle, is seeking assurances on the progress on that work. So not just that we know, but also that the public knows, that they can see that capping, which is supposed to be in place by the end of January, is being progressed on time, and that it is permanent capping and not the temporary capping which the operator said in its press release.
Councillor Tagg, if there are no further speakers on paragraph 2, Councillor Fox-Hewitt. That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick point of order. The Leader of the Council made an assertion there that Labour members were behind personal abuse that he often gets, but particularly on Wally's Quarry, and that a complaint was made. Can the Chief Executive or the Monitoring Officer clarify to the Council, was any complaints investigated and upheld? Thank you.
I think if we're talking about the same meeting. I think there was a complaint. It wasn't upheld. I recall.
Are there any other further speakers on paragraph 2? Councillor John Williams.
Put my hand up twice on the debate that we had about Newcastle Borough Council, and I put my hand up. You've recognised me this time. Yeah, but I have real concerns for the residents of that area, but particularly we don't mention the travellers, which are right. If anybody, we go tonight, go round that corner on Cemetery Road, the smell is appalling. So it's there all the time, and that have we got any representations from the travellers camp on Cemetery Road about the odour and health problems? Thank you.
In that case, we should move on to paragraph 3.
A really good point, and I know through the SCG there's extra sort of analysis and concentration on those people that are so close to this, which is that there are many people very close to this, but the people that live on the traveller site are really at the epicentre of this. And if you remember in the fire that happened at the end of the summer, whenever that was, then we had real concern if the wind was in a different direction that they would have been possibly at harm if that fire had spread in that direction. So I think, yes, they are on ground zero almost, and that is reflected in our officers with our partners do monitor the situation from the point of view of their well-being as well, health and everything else.
Sorry about that, members. Paragraph 3, it's about the borough local plan submission. Do members have any comments or questions on paragraph 3? Councillor Bryan, Councillor Crisp. We'll hear from Councillor Bryan first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Residents in my ward of Mare and Whitmore have suffered more than most with speculative development because the borough didn't have a local plan. Couldn't the portfolio holder outline the next steps now that the local plan has been submitted and how it protects rural areas like mine? Thank you.
Is there a supplementary question? Thank you, Councillor Crisp.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very happy to hear that the borough local plan has been submitted. I was hoping that by getting it in on time, not listening to the delaying tactics of the Labour group, that Audley would have been spared some of these 2,000 extra homes that Angela Rayner has been talking about. But what I hear now is, even though we got it in on time, there's talk of the Labour government forcing through a new local plan. So we've been through the process in good faith with the people of Audley and elsewhere. But can the portfolio holder shed light on what's going on here?
Any supplementary question?
No, thanks.
Councillor Tagg.
To the portfolio holder for the answer.
With your permission, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it's certainly the case that the local plan has been submitted. It was submitted just before Christmas in a timely fashion, and I would like to thank our planning team for all the hard work they've put in over the consultations, getting the evidence up, getting all the documentation sorted out. It's been a big ask for them. They've risen to the task magnificently, and I think we all in this chamber owe them a huge vote of thanks for the work that they've put in. And I hope that all members can associate themselves with that statement. What does this mean? Well, it certainly means that we didn't have to put in the revised housing target from our plan that the government, when the new government came in, they changed the rules slightly in that respect, and we missed out on that. So in that respect, our local plan has the old rules, so to speak. However, not all, I'm afraid, is rosy in the garden. Because just before Christmas, and again, of course, it's a good time to bury bad news, and I leave that one for people to think about. There is now a new national planning framework, the new MPPF, and the new government has changed the rules, and the rules have been changed in such a way that the housing requirement will go up. And if we don't meet 80% of the new requirement and we fall just short of that, we will have to go through the local plan procedure again. There is a timetable for that. Documentation will come to Cabinet. I think this is extremely regrettable personally, but it is the law and therefore we will most certainly comply with it. And I can also undertake that we will use the same rigour, the same depth of consultation in framing our new plan that we've done in the previous one. So there's some good news for members, but I'm afraid because the government has moved the goalposts, there's also some not so good news for the medium term.
If there's no other speakers on this paragraph, we'll move on to paragraph 4. This paragraph 4 is about the draft revenue and capital budget and strategies for 2025-26. Do members have any comments or questions on paragraph 4? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I see that the current government has decided to cut the minimum funding guarantee of 4%, which was introduced by the previous government last year. They plan to cut it to 0%. So could the finance portfolio holder tell me what are the financial implications of this savage cut and how it will affect this council?
The other speakers? Councillor Sweeney?
Obviously, Councillor Sweeney was asked the question.
Thank you, Councillor Parker, for the question. And I'm glad to see you've got such an interest in local government finance. It's a fascinating subject, so welcome aboard. Actual grant funding paid to the council by central government as part of the local government finance settlement will be cut from 6.123 million in 24-25 to 5.852 million in 25-26. This is a cut of £271,000 or 4.4% when compared to 24/25. I heard the Labour group earlier talking about austerity. Well, there you go. Labour austerity in action. Thank you.
If there are no further speakers on this, we will go on to paragraph 5, and this is about the car parking strategy for 2019 to 29 and an update. Do members have any comments or questions on paragraph 5? Councillor Wheeldon and Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to note that I really welcome wholeheartedly, as do many of my residents at Thistlebury, the charge of the £1 after 1 o'clock, that it's still running on surface level car parks around the town centre. It was brought in, I would have everyone note, by the Conservative administration in 2018 to help the footfall in the town centre, something that we're always trying to encourage and hope to enhance the whole community feel of our market town again. Could the Deputy Leader outline the benefits of this popular car parking concession and let us know how it's working?
Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think I've missed it in other reports, but it's about disabled parking. And well, on the new car park, will be free parking for disabled badge holders. That's the first part of it. And when the car parks are proposed to be sold off, will there still be that amount of disabled car parking places within the town? That's the point I'm making. As they reduce the car parks in the town, will there still be an amount of disabled car parks? And just to make a point, Mr. Chairman, I hope if we do have disabled parking, they're not on banks. Because Newcastle is on a plateau with the Bankgate side, and you some disabled parking is on banks. And I'll be able to, with a personal experience, it's very, very difficult to walk up those banks to get to the town centre. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If there's no other speakers, Councillor Tack, would you like to respond?
Directed to Councillor Sweeney, weren't they, the question, first one particularly, so I'll allow him to answer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the questions. First question is, yeah, we made a point of this £1 after 1, keeping it. I think it's been a very successful thing. I think it's improved the footfall in the town centre. If you want to go out for a meal at night or something, you put £1 in and then you forget about it. You needn't have to think, oh, the tyres, they might be looking at me. You can enjoy it. I think we've always said on this council that we've never used our car parks as some sort of milk cow thing. That if you read the Daily Mail, all councils are fleecing their residents and trousering huge amounts of money. Well, we don't do that in Newcastle, and we haven't done since we came in 2017. And I think this is another example of it. As to the new car park, the Newcastle car park, there will be disabled access to the Newcastle car park, but it will not be free. But the ground level parking around the town centre will be exactly the same. That won't change at all. So if people want to park on the market like they normally do till 11 o'clock, they feel free to do it. None of that'll change. But there's not a facility on the new car park. I know it is on new car parks. I think Stoke have got the same on theirs. There's not a facility when you can do it because there's nobody there to man it. Nobody there to look at disabled cars. But the actual parking on the around the town won't change at all for disabled people. Thank you.
Thank you, members. There's no further speakers on paragraph 5. We move on to paragraph 6, and this is about the Navigation House refurbishment contract award. Do members have any comments or questions on paragraph 6? John Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When this navigation house came before planning, I refused the permission, or one of them refused permission, simply because it hadn't been scrutinised and the way it, in my view, should have been. So that's water under the bridge. When this new facility is put in place, we said we'd give it 12 months from the start of occupation, people being in there. I've started 12 months. At the end of 12 months, can I ask that it comes back to scrutiny? And why it is scrutiny? I'm sure the building will be adequate. The management of that building will be adequate. The professional people, they know what they're doing. But we're concerned with the antisocial behaviour outside of the particular building. And we care for the residents who live in that area. And that's one of the reasons why I said it should have gone to scrutiny before it came to planning. Now, I'm hoping next time when it comes after 12 months of the people living there, it will be brought to scrutiny before it's brought to the planning committee. Because in my view, what we were asked to do at planning was actually to scrutinise it in depth. And I don't think that should be the case of the planning committee. Thank you.
There's no further speakers on paragraph 6. I'll ask the council tag to respond.
I think obviously portfolio holder Jill Heatham has taken this through cabinet, so I'll hand over to her and then add comments of my own after if I could.
Yeah, Councillor Williams, thank you for your question. I don't have a problem with it going back to scrutiny or going to scrutiny. I can't see that it would make a lot of difference, if I'm perfectly honest. The council officers at the moment and the rough sleeper team that we've got here are liaising very closely with residents in the area and the community. So the only people that are actually going to be using that are people that are wanting support. So it's going to be interesting to see if there is an antisocial behaviour, because that is what they're working with the community now to basically to put measures in place to not have that happening.
Councillor Tagg.
I think this borough can be proud over many years. Any administration that's been in charge of this council since I've been involved since 2003 has tried to tackle homelessness, has put facilities in and around the town centre, and this is just an increasing of that, isn't it? And another attempt to help people back into a lifestyle, which means they don't have to be on the street. So anything that is welcome on that. I think I do share the issues of the community, and I think we must make sure that facility works for them as well. And of course, as the portfolio holder said, if there's any sort of scrutiny, because obviously it's been through the planning, yes, but it's also a council-run facility, isn't it? And quite rightly, scrutiny could have a role to review it in 12 months or something like that. And I just think, as I heard Jill say, she'd be quite happy with that. So something for the chair of the relevant scrutiny committee to consider putting that on the work programme.
Thank you, Councillor Tagg. Members, we move on to paragraph 7. Which is about the update on decarbonisation of the council's operational buildings and fleet. Do members have any comments or questions on paragraph 7? Councillor Northcote, Councillor Paul Waring, and yes, the young lady on the end there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thanks to the leader for this update. And I think it's an excellent news story. I would like to congratulate the leader and the cabinet, in particularly the portfolio holder, David Hodgson, portfolio of sustainable environment, building on the good work that was put down by Councillor Johnson before him towards a more sustainable environment in Newcastle. And increased recycling is a particular favourite of mine, and I wish to congratulate him. I also wish to congratulate the team that's done the hard work, particularly the trials and tribulations over the difficult weather conditions recently since January the 6th. the actual collection was faultless in terms of its delivery. It wasn't always on the day that it should have been, but there was clear and adequate instructions on the council website to make sure that people knew when the mist collections would be mopped up when the weather improved. So I particularly like this excellency that is built into the council. And the question I would like to ask the leader and Councillor Hutchison, can this continue in the future, please?
Councillor Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would echo what Councillor Northcott said. I think that the performance has been truly excellent given the situation we've been in, and the communication was very good. But my question is about the trees at Clough Hall Park, and I would like to ask the portfolio holder for sustainable and environment. What are the plans in relation to the council to replace the trees that were actually lost in Clough Hall Park? Thank you.
So we're in Councillor Barrett. Sorry, I couldn't find the moment you've forgotten your name. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank David Hutchison as well. Our voice, it's okay. No, I'll have to do it this way, don't I? Right. Thank you. I'd also like to thank David Hutchinson and his team who were very quick to respond to me when I was dealing with some residents in Madeley who were very annoyed about their missed collections, and they actually got collected on the day the team said they would. So thank you for that. I also welcomed the 35% reduction in carbon emissions in the last year. Please, would the portfolio holder give us some more information on how this figure was achieved?
Thank you, Councillor Tagg. You want to respond? Excuse me, lights not working. Yeah, I will come in after the portfolio holder because some questions were directed to him.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll go in reverse order, I think. The council's carbon emissions has fallen by 68.37% since measurements began 15 years ago. And efforts by the Newcastle and the Lyme Borough Council, long may it continue, have accelerated within the last 12 months as a switch to a biodegradable and fossil-free fuel for its heavy goods vehicles, which has cut the carbon emissions by 35% year on year. This is the first full year that we've used the hydro-treated vegetable oil, and it's now given us the 35% reduction, which is the main reason for the big jump to 68.37. Also, more recently, we've installed solar panels on a lot of the roofs, 4 buildings that I can recall at the moment: Kids Grove Town Hall offices, Bradwell Crematorium offices, and we got the Keele Cemetery offices as well. We've installed solar panels there, which are basically generating 46,500 kilowatts of green energy and saving 10 tonnes of CO2 emissions every single year. And this is how you get a smile on Councillor Sweeney's face. This is also going to save about £15,000 per year ongoing. So if you want to get a smile from Councillor Sweeney, you talk about savings and his capital revenue budget.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. If there's no further speakers on paragraph 7.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
You've finished.
Clough Hall Park. Yeah, I've had a lot of the Kids Grove councillors asking me about this one. The wind in Kids Grove on the Thursday night before we had Storm Dara arrive was brutal, with some residents calling it a tornado. Around 60 healthy trees, which had been routinely inspected only a fortnight earlier, were uprooted in the Clough Hall Park, along with another 100 or so trees in the woodland area. In the days immediately after, officers had to deal with the consequences of Storm Dara by prioritising the trees directly threatening public safety, such as the damaged ones near homes and near pavements. Storm Dara, which happened shortly after the tornado, hindered the recovery work as we could not expose any staff member or contractor to any damage. All lost trees will be replaced in due course. The council has a policy of providing a sapling for every lost tree, as well as the long-standing tree planting strategy, which has seen more than 19,600 trees planted in recent years. We see that as a vital investment in the community's future, both supporting and nature recovery and capturing the carbon emissions. I can confirm that Cloughall Park will reopen at the end of this month, which is great news for the residents that have missed the park while it's being closed. Finally, I'll just comment on, sorry, Councillor Northcott. Recycling and waste. Yeah, on the Monday, the 6th of January, the bad weather has had a significant impact on us, being able to collect all recycled and waste materials from residents. It was hoped that we would catch up by the Friday, the 10th of January, but further snow, falling temperatures and ice continue to impact the service severely. We must put safety of our staff and residents at the top of the agenda. Driving heavy goods vehicles on untreated roads, as well as operatives emptying bins on untreated pavements and untreated roads presents a very high safety risk. The loaders could easily slip on ice and result with a broken leg. The 26-ton recycling and waste vehicle is a heavy beast. The weight of the vehicle will not stop it sliding. If it starts to slide, the vehicle will keep on going until it stops or it hits something. We regularly put out messages and briefings to members, 6th of January, 10th of January, 17th of January, and there'll be a new update this Friday on the 22nd of January so that all members are fully updated on what's going on. We message continually on social media, on the Borough Council website. The information given was fluid, liable to change, but the overall message was to keep your bins out and we will get to them when we are able. On last Tuesday, I spent some time up with customer services on the second floor, and I was monitoring the messages that they were talking to residents about. And I'm pleased to say the customer services did a great job in passing on the message, leave the bins out, and we will get to them when we can. I'd just like to say the crews have been brilliant. The teamwork and determination to get us up and back on track has been very strong. I would like to put in the minutes that I'm very proud of every team member in the recycling and waste management, and also every team member in street scene. Every one of you shared the responsibility of the recovery, and it was all shoulders to the wheel. So thank you to everyone. It's a real pleasure and an honour to be the cabinet member for this particular portfolio. Normal waste collections started again on Monday, the 20th of January. As of the close of business yesterday, we were fully up to date in most areas except Keele, Silverdale and Madeley. As of this evening, I think we are up to date. I think there's about 1,600 recycle collections that were missed today, but they're going to be done tomorrow. Additional support is now being offered to the food waste, which has got a little bit behind. But the good news is the food waste that we have picked up this week has been really, really heavy. That means that people kept it back. They didn't put it in the grey bin, so it's going in the right stream for processing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope that's enough.
Councillor Tag. I've got nothing further to add. Councillor Hutchins has said it all.
Thank you. I would like to reiterate your comments about the recollection, because it was done where I live as well. It's finally done today, but well done. You have done a sterling job. Anyway, members, if there's no further speakers on paragraph 7, we'll move to paragraph 8, which is about the forward plan. Do members have any comments or questions on paragraph 8? Wilden.
Just a quick comment. Sometimes it's very easy to be critical and pessimistic of anything that's going. One of the things that I note, having read newspapers avidly, watched the television reluctantly, is that a lot of local authorities, be they borough or county, whichever they are actually dreadful. Average at best. What we should note here is that in our borough, our Newcastle and Lyme borough, we have a perfect template and should be more positive about it, and others could learn from what we do for fiscal responsibility, responsibility to our citizens in representation of them and actually looking after them, rather than representing a government or a member at senior level. We represent the citizens rather than authority.
Councillor Tagg?
I agree.
Members, if there's no other speakers on paragraph 8, that will conclude the leader's statement. We will now move on to the next item of business, which is agenda item 7, reports of the chairs of the scrutiny committees. The next, this agenda is item 7 and can be found on pages 43 and 44 of your agenda. Reports are attached there for the Economy and Place Scrutiny Committee, the Health, Wellbeing and Environment Scrutiny Committee, and the Finance, Assets and Performance Scrutiny Committee. These reports are here for your information and noting. Can these votes please be received? Thank you. Right. Agenda item 8 is reports of the chairs of the regulatory committees. A verbal update will be given for the Planning Committee. Councillor Northcott, would you like to give your update, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Planning Committee has only met once since the last full council, and that was on the 3rd of December last year. The agenda that night was quite full, and members deliberated till 10 o'clock, which is a rarity recently. There were 5 major developments that came before the committee, which included an application for major development 9 to 11 Liverpool Road, Newcastle under Lyme. Members had a long debate on this item, raising concerns on the design, building and the cumulative effect on the highways in terms of parking. It was no surprise that the application was refused for those reasons. Next came an application for the northwest of Bar Hill, Madeley. This is an amended recommendation subject to the applicant first entering into a Section 106 agreement by the 31st of January this year. This application was also permitted by the committee subject to the conditions. Next came an application for major development, land at Bathpool Road, Silverdale. And that's also subject to the applicant entering into a Section 106 agreement, which was permitted subject to the aforementioned conditions. The next item of business contained a major development for land between Apedale Road and Palatine Drive, Chesterton. This application was permitted subject to the conditions of the report. Last but not least, the next major development was the former Jubilee Baths, Nelson Place. Again, members debated at quite some considerable length and raised concerns, again regarding parking in the town. It was resolved that the application be refused for the reasons due to lack of parking provision. 8 and 9 on the agenda, that item contained 2 minor applications of Parkhouse Industrial Estate and Bathpool Park. These were both permitted as per printed conditions. Item 10 was an interesting addition to the agenda. This concerned a non-determination appeal for 150 units. The land is south of Eccleshill Road, Loggerheads. Members were asked if they agreed with the officer's arguments in proposing a refusal of the application that was set out in the report. Members resolved that this report be accepted. Last but not least, on that evening, there was an application for financial assistance, which is the Historic Buildings Grant for St Margaret's Primary School, Woolstanton, for £5,000. This was unanimously agreed. That's my report, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Northcott. The Licensing and Public Protection Committee and the Audit and Standards Committee have not met since the last meeting of the full council. And this report is here for your information and noting. Can this report please be received? Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 9, which is questions to the Mayor, the Cabinet members and the committee chairs. I have received 2 questions for the Leader and the Cabinet members. These can be found on pages 45 of your agenda pack, will also be shown on the screens. I will ask the Leader or the relevant Cabinet member to respond to the question as shown, after which I will ask the member who submitted if they have a supplementary question. Could I remind members that if they have a supplementary question, it must be a question, not a statement, and it must be concise, focused and relate to the subject matter of the initial question and answer. The first question comes from Councillor Richard Gorton regarding VEJ and VJ anniversaries on the screen. One moment, please.
Okay, do you want the response, Mr. Mayor? I don't think we read them out now, do we? Now they're on the screen. Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Councillor Gorton, for this question. And it's something we really want to take seriously in this year of the 80th anniversary of V&VJ Day, as we've done previously with the D-Day, if you remember, last year, and also the Platinum Jubilee of the late Queen Elizabeth II celebrations. Though we're still waiting some national guidance to come through as well, I can confirm that we will be having a beacon lighting ceremony in the Queen's Gardens. We had one last year for the D-Day, and that was really well attended, and I think it was a really great event with our church colleagues as well involved in it as well. So we'll aim to do that again this year. And also there'll be a special commemorative church service on the relevant Sunday as well, which will be advertised as a civic service as well. And we'll also be, as usual, these events, being able to take applications from residents who want to close roads. So we'll be able to allow those to happen for street parties as well, if necessary, or events within streets to celebrate this momentous event of 80 years of VE and VJ. And also, as usual, our museum will be doing a series of events using our brilliant museum at the focal point of our borough, not only to look at the national and international ramifications of D-Day, but also the impact on Newcastle and residents of Newcastle as well. And I think that's really important that we do that as well. And the museum will be working on a programme of those. So I can reassure Councillor Gorton it will be celebrated. And also, lastly, I would say, is also where we have control over war memorials, they will be central focus of any celebrations going forward. And we will ensure that they are in a tip-top condition. They are under our protection and ownership and maintenance. Thank you.
Councillor Gordon, do you have a supplementary?
Just thank the Leader of the Council for his reply and look forward to these details being put in the public domain in due course.
Thank you. The next question is from Councillor Mark Holland regarding the winter fuel payment and is on the screen. Councillor Tuck, your response?
Not yet on the screen. Taking a moment to wait to go for it. Seems to transition.
Oh dear. We seem to be set with a few technical issues tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Holland, for the letter. I think just as part of it, you mentioned the motion we passed in September, which I believe was unanimously agreed by everybody in the council. Obviously, part of that was that we would champion the campaign against the cut to the winter fuel allowance. We did that. We wrote also to all community groups, the Guildhall, for example, and all of the Aspire and partners, and all those things that were in the motion, all those agencies were in the motion to help them, to raise the issue with them. And we also held two sessions for pensioners to come in and have advice on obviously applying for pensions credit. One was held here in the library, and the other one was held in Kidsgrove before the deadline for to qualify for this year's winter fuel allowance. References made to the letters to the MPs and to the Chancellor Rachel Reeves. I confirm those letters did go. We haven't received anything from the Chancellor of the Exchequer. We didn't receive any response from our MPs, but prior to the meeting, there was a letter from our MPs reaching out for a meeting. We tried to set up a meeting and we haven't been able to set that up, or I believe the Chief Executive's office did give a number of dates to MPs, but that was not able to be set up. As for I saw the roving surgeries report, comments in the report in the paper. I've checked up because I know that just like we as councillors are, our MP is very sort of savvy on social media, and I can only see one event pre-Christmas that was related to pensions credit. I'll have to have another look, or I'll have to follow that up with the MP's office himself to get the answer to that question, Councillor Holland.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Holland?
I do, Mr. Mayor. I thank the leader for his answer. It being the case that he didn't get a reply from the Chancellor or the MP, would he write again and then in the course of either corresponding with the MP or in the meeting that's been suggested, would you please ask how many of these surgeries were held and how many people might reasonably have expected to have been assisted in their application for pensions credit? I understand that in the time since the government made that announcement, there has been a rise in people applying for pensions credit, but very sadly, it won't have been 100% of those people who are eligible. So we need to know what works, and I would very much like our local MP to receive his share of credit for supporting that campaign to get people who are eligible to sign up. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor, any further comments?
I certainly do that, yes, and I think it's really important that people make commitments that they actually carry them through, and we need to obviously find that out, and I will feed that back to members and also to Councillor Holland who asked the question.
Councillor Tagg. Members, the next item is item 10, receipts of petitions. I have not received any petitions which were handed in this evening. Items 11 and 12 on the agenda relate to urgent and confidential business. I have not received any urgent or confidential business. This therefore concludes the business of this meeting, and I therefore declare the meeting closed. And Councillor Hutchinson, could I have a quick word with you in private afterwards? Nothing to do with what's on tonight.
Right.